Good morning, Manteca Unified. So I was walking in, and I'm about 6 blocks down that way in the middle of the rain because I got here a little later than a lot of people. And I was thinking, you know, this is a great day for staff development, but it's really not fair. The kids all get to stay home. That's not fair. And then I thought, if I'm an elementary teacher, you know you K-3 teachers? That means they're driving their parents nuts on the first rainy day of the season. So that may not be such a bad thing. I am very glad you guys are all here. We have a fantastic speaker for you this morning that has been working with us on this journey for over a year. And so it is my pleasure to introduce this morning Dr. Cathy Cavanaugh. Dr. Cathy Cavanaugh is Director of Teaching and Learning in Worldwide Education at Microsoft Corporation. Working with educational leaders and organizations around the world, Cathy's 150-plus research projects and publications focus on technology, empowered teaching and learning in virtual schools, online and blended learning, teacher development, mobile learning, and integration of devices into schools. Her work has been recognized for its impact with international awards. Cathy held faculty and leadership appointments in U.S. universities and college in the Middle East, and was a Fulbright Senior Scholar advancing e-learning in Nepal. She also directed professional development centers in the U.S. and was a classroom teacher in the U.S. and the Caribbean. Her education includes a PhD in educational technology and a degree in science education. I've come to know her as a very quiet, strong voice, and I hope you enjoy listening to her this morning. Dr. Cavanaugh.
Good morning, Manteca. Good morning. I'm here really to thank you. And if you were here in the earlier session and you heard the 4 teachers and you saw the stories of the schools, they did an amazing job talking about some of the possible impacts of Microsoft technology. So I thank them for what they've done and all of you for what you've done. So I first met, encountered, heard the word Manteca about a year and a half ago when the leadership team came to Redmond. And they had a vision. So you know the vision, the Going Digital vision. It was, I think, year 1 of the vision. And so as they were talking, I thought, whatever I was going to say, I'm throwing out. Let's just talk about the vision and some thoughts about where it's going and what's in store. And I was incredibly impressed at that point because, as you heard from Superintendent Messer, I work in a team that works around the world with education systems and leaders, and they all have a vision, they all have a purpose, they all have a sense of where they're going, but they don't all have all of the pieces in place that I heard from Manteca that day. So I knew that this was a place where exciting things could happen, probably would happen. So in that time, in that year and a half, I've encountered Manteca people, as I call them. I'm a fan. We run into each other at various conferences and events, and they've come to the Redmond campus a couple of times. So I've begun to think of them as superheroes or celebrities of educational technology. And so it's been kind of like, oh, and I watch the videos. So I'm a fan of the YouTube as well. So I saw the YouTube channel and watched the videos. So it's kind of like, as I was explaining to Victoria this morning, a Disney experience. So I knew the characters, I knew the movies, but I've never been to the Magic Kingdom. So tremendously thrilled to finally be here to meet you. And already an hour this morning has been a great learning experience. I've tweeted, and I've got lots of ideas to carry back. So my main message today is really not about technology. So, if you're hoping to get a HoloLens and, see new stuff, that's not happening. I had my hand on a HoloLens for about 10 seconds. It's really still in the secret basement. So we'll be excited when that happens. But really what I want to do is to help you to feel what you mean to the world. That sounds made up, maybe. And if it takes me shaking your hand personally, giving you a hug to help you feel what you mean to the world, I will do that today. So I want to share with you a few stories and examples of what I've come to see and what impact you have had in the past year and a half for Microsoft. So Microsoft is about 100,000 employees around the world, not all of them in education, but more all the time. I'm focusing on education. And there are thousands of Microsoft employees around the world who work in education. All of them know Manteca. They know Manteca stories, they know Manteca's movies, they know Manteca people, they know some of the samples, the sways, the OneNotes. They're spreading the Manteca message throughout the world, and it's making a difference. So I'm sharing with you a little bit of how it's making a difference within the context of transcendent learning. So the only thing I'll say about myself is that it's hard to say, to tell that is me and my first group of students, my first class of students, long ago and far away. And this is the town where I was teaching on the island of St. Croix. And, people say, how could you even think about teaching? Because that was the view out at my window, and the school was a block away, and I was a science teacher. So we spent most of our time outside the school. It was great. My computer, my technology, was my Commodore 64. So I wheeled in, monitor. And the students, there was no technology. So there was a film projector, you remember? Yeah, and the ditto machine, all that stuff. So students saw a computer, and immediately they were engaged and enthralled. And you could almost see on their faces, like electricity. Something was happening inside. They were starting to think, what if? What if I could do something with that? What could I do? You could start to see possibilities kind of bubbling inside them. It didn't take much at that point. So all we didn't have software. We had that, the magnetic tape, the audio tape that stored files. So students would actually have to type in the machine language using like a page out of a PC magazine. But they learned basic, and they learned to make the computer do something. So they had some autonomy, they had that agency, they were able to control something, create something. It was tiny, and it lasted a second, but they did it. And they learned how to do it, and they could share it with others. That's why I love some of the stories this morning about students sharing. So it was exciting, and it's still exciting to be working in education. And it'll be exciting when I click with the clicker. I don't know. But by the way, when you go to Disney and you get a souvenir, and it's exciting, this is what I got. You're like, I went to the gift shop. Take this home, the logo. Wear it. So Maslow, right? Yeah, we all know Maslow. So recently, there's the top level. It's been added to Maslow. So for, decades, we've been trying to get, students up through into those middle levels. Making sure they're taken care of, but then get them up to the esteem and the cognitive. That's what school is about. And then help them to move into appreciation and the aesthetics. And finally, self-actualization. Who are they as people? How do they find meaning as individuals? That's very internal. That's not very community, collaboratively oriented. So people who've been thinking about this propose this top-level transcendence. Kind of an airy word, which is appropriate for it being on the top. When you think about transcendence, as far as students are concerned, as far as educators are concerned, and what we do, how do we transcend? How do we kind of go outside of ourselves? How do we take our practice and help students to see the world beyond themselves and to find meaning, more importantly, thinking about others outside of themselves? So that's why one of the reasons why I liked the Kinderbuddy project, the intermediate students going into the kindergarten class and being mentors and teachers and kind of co-learners. They're thinking outside themselves. They're finding purpose with others, through service in a way. So as far as transcendence in education, that's really part of the message that I have for you. You have meaning outside of Manteca. You are inspiring people around the world through the individual things that you and your students accomplish and through the approach that the district has taken with technology. So one of the things that impressed me when I met Manteca was they did not deliberate on time or scope. So when we went to France, my team went to France, French Ministry of Education. Ministers of Education were saying, well, you know, it's a big place. We were thinking about a pilot program. See how it goes. And internally, we're all sitting there going, if you know you want to change, and you know you've got an idea of what's right, why wait for a pilot program? Manteca, no pilots, all in. So we share stories about how it's going, what Manteca did, and it was equity, right? They had me at equity. It's an equity issue to give students opportunities and tools and methods for learning and creating and all those C's that Peter was mentioning. So we shared the story of Manteca as inspiration for what can happen in a short period of time with vision and with deliberation. All right, so I was at an event. Actually, it was an event that Superintendent Messer joined in Mexico. It was the BET event, the British Educational Technology Show. And there was a group of education change makers who challenged the audience and said, imagine a new school, new, really new, different, not like a school that we have now. Comes into your area, it does so well in 5 years. It proves itself. It's so effective in helping students to achieve within 5 years that other schools are doubting, the students are moving, there's change, there's discussion about what schools should be. Now you are fortunate because you're sort of building together a newer school, a new version of a school. But it starts with this vision. And so you have a vision as a district, the going digital vision. As an educator, that vision about what can be new, starts with that I believe statement, right? I believe students can. I believe education can. I believe that learning is. So be thinking about that statement for you. You know, maybe you already have that mission that drives you, okay? But that's a guide to help us figure out where and why we do what we do. I liked the question earlier that you may have heard. How do we get started? How do I know kind of where the starting point is sometimes when I've got new tools and new technologies and new possibilities? Well, what is it that I believe matters the most? And what is the one thing that I might be able to use to help me? To help me to get to what I believe. What's a starting point that I feel strongly will help me to get to what I believe and build from there? Start with that one thing that we can do that's important, that matters. So you may know John Hattie, an Australian researcher who has looked across decades of education research to decide what matters. What are those things that we really need to focus on, that we think are high return sorts of activities that we can do? He doesn't really think a lot about technology other than technology as a category for him. It's not part of the learning environment. It's not part of the strategies. But he's got about 130, over 100, you may know the number, over 100 high return effects on learning. So he's categorized these. He's looked across the research around the world over decades. This is how he's ranking those high return activities. So at the top, that's the highest effect size. So it's likely that a student who has very strong formative evaluation could move almost to grade level from a condition where they don't have that. So these are sort of translated into grade level shifts. So these are just the top 12 or so out of the hundreds of effects that he's looked at. So these are nice starting points too. Right, so formative evaluation, reciprocal teaching, which was what I loved about the Kinder Buddy story, metacognition, self-questioning. Those are things that students can do. They don't necessarily do them naturally, and that they can be guided to do, especially with the technology. And that's what I saw happening with the OneNotes and the Sways, and some of the great examples that were shared this morning. So choosing what matters within my content for my students, what matters in terms of high return practices, and what are the tools that are available that can help with those high return practices. All right. So we hear a lot about growth, transformation, innovation. And we hear in the same conversation sometimes disruption and fear. So I want to get a sense of what you think about that. So we hear that disruptive innovation comes from the corporate world and it's seeped its way into education. So it's one way of thinking about change. If things are so hurt or behind or not accomplishing what they should, that they need to be disrupted. They really need to be pushed in a disruptive way. Kind of one end of the spectrum. In the middle is we need to be on a growth mindset. We need to be thinking about what's possible. We need to be thinking about how we move forward. We need to be thinking about innovation because even if we're doing great, which was one of the stories that the superintendent shared, high school graduation in the district is really, really high. The goal is beyond that. How students succeeding beyond that. So there's a reason to keep going, to keep innovating. All students can succeed and potentially all that's possible. There's still ways to improve. I'm in the middle of the spectrum. Then there's the fear end. People fear change. So if you were to put yourself at the disruption, everything needs to change quickly, the kind of growth, innovation, we need to keep moving part of the spectrum, or the people fear change end of the spectrum. When we think about school, as 1, 2, and 3. What do you think is most true? You just hold up your fingers. You think, for the most part, in education, we need to disrupt. Hold up 1. If you think we need to be growing, innovating, keep innovating, iterating, hold up 2. If you think, well, it's really fearful, we need to be really careful, we need to help people feel comfortable, hold up 3. What do you think? This is a really great bell curve. Thank you. Okay, so I see, I would estimate unscientifically, I should have taken a picture and then done some machine learning or something to figure this out, but I would estimate 10 to 15% were ones. We need to disrupt, not disruption, we have to define what that means. I would estimate that probably 60 to 70% were in that middle. We need change. There's always ways to grow. There are always ways to continue innovating and improving. And then I saw probably 10% at the end where we fear change. There is fear of change. So let's talk about the fear of change end a little bit. In our lives, our personal lives, we grow and mature. We embrace a lot of things. A lot of people are considered risk takers. They want stimulation. They want to keep learning. They want to keep experiencing. They want to see the new movie. So it's not so much change per se, but maybe fear of discomfort, right? Especially if in my practice, in my profession, maybe how I define myself, I'm being encouraged, pushed to change. So there is some truth to that. I think there are ways, definitely, to address that, to think about the value of change, to think about what that fear might be, where it's coming from, and how to work through it or use it. But most people are that center sweet spot, that nice area where, yes, we're encouraged, we're motivated, we know that there's opportunity. And the disruptive side, that's the rebel side. Those are people who are so impatient, they have such urgency that things really need to change. And we see that happen. So I just had a phone call last week from Alt School. You know these people in the San Francisco Bay Area? Alt School. Okay, so it's an alternative school. It's a network, a network of micro schools, small schools, that are totally personalized, customized, mastery-based. Not a set calendar and curriculum. And they bring students together in very, very small learning communities. Expensive. So they're on the disruption side. They think school, as it's envisioned in the U.S. today, needs to be completely rethought, replaced, rebuilt from the ground up. And it's great that people with money are able to try out some models like that, but it may not be great for every student. So on either end, the fear end and the disruption end, I think we need to be looking really closely, not only at what's happening in terms of the effects on education systems, but what's happening with individual students. Are there students who are being held back, not given opportunities because of fear? Are there students who are given opportunities that don't want to because of disruption? So, think about our approach to growth. So, organizations. I see you as an organization with a very strong growth mindset, Manteca Unified. Everything that I hear, everything that I see is about we can do better, we can do more. We've got tools, we're putting in place the conditions, we're building the culture to do more for students, for the community. So I want to share with you an approach to organizational growth and change. Because organizations in education are government systems, they're districts, they're schools, they're classrooms. Each classroom is an organization. Each classroom has a culture. Each classroom could have any of these cultures or a mix of these cultures. So this is Cameron and Quinn, who study organizational culture and advise organizations on how they can change if they want to change. They actually have instruments that are available. So if, as a school or a classroom, you wanted to see kind of where we are, and then think together about how happy we are, where we want to change, what could be changed, those are tools that are available. But take a look at these 4 categories that they've identified, and see which ones you think apply to your school or your classroom. Think about locally for you. Clan. So clan brings to mind some of the words that Peter used earlier, collaboration and community. Okay, we know students need to be collaborative, they need to feel community. That's kind of part of the gang phenomenon, right, in adolescence. They need to feel valued, loved, appreciated. They need to feel a purpose. And that all comes with a community. If they're very, very fortunate, that comes from their family and their neighborhoods, other communities, their school, and their friends. Not always is that the case, though. So organizations can have this clan-oriented culture. They're family-like and nurturing, with a focus on mentoring and doing things together. It's not good or bad. It is. And it's not that any of these will completely describe any culture, right? So they're combinations. And typically what happens is that a culture will get a diagram that shows how far they are on each of these dimensions. So think about how important a clan-oriented culture is for a classroom or a school, and whether you feel like that's the culture that yours has. Second one is adhocracy, which really is the innovative culture. So it's a focus on risk-taking, doing new things, trying new things. Sometimes being first, being seen as being innovative, as well as truly being innovative and dynamic. That's that change-embracing culture. Think about how important that is, and whether that's present. Then a market-oriented culture is competition and achievement. So this one, when I talk to educators, they feel they might not want that culture, they might not want the market-oriented culture to dominate, but it's imposed on them sometimes from the structures of standardized achievement and other kinds of measures. Then the hierarchy culture, efficiency, stability, getting things done. So in any school or classroom, there needs to be some attention to hierarchy and getting things done, efficiency. We need to be responsible citizens and stewards. We need to have some sense of kind of where we are in comparison, because that's how the world and families and communities will with us. The other two, family and innovation, clan and adhocracy, those are the ones where the tension seems to be in education. Are we nurturing and comforting? Are we helping the people at the fear end to feel more comfortable? Or are we disrupting and innovating and pushing? Or do we want balance among those two sides, those two cultural sides of an organization? So think about where you are, what you think might be ideal. There are measures and mechanisms for change. So this is the adhocracy culture, because there's so much talk in education about innovation and change. So I wanted to show some details about that type of a culture. So if you feel that that's important in a classroom, school, or district, and you're interested in seeing how that can be grown and developed, that's a kind of culture that values people working together for a common goal, working together toward a new future, which to me describes the district in a lot of ways. But it's also agility, right? Because we can't necessarily, and I like that the Going Digital vision has 3 years and is sort of evolving and shifting over time, because conditions evolve and shift, opportunities evolve and shift. So it needs to be dynamic as well as forward thinking. I like the surprise and delight. Surprise and delight. Yeah, so I think you've got a lot of attention to some of the characteristics of this kind of culture, this innovative culture. So thinking about that balance, you know, there may be a feeling that we're not quite doing that enough or doing that too much. We don't have that balance. So it's always good to be thinking about where that balance is for everyone. All right, so a little bit more about what Manteca means to the world. So you've heard about Finland, been in education for a while. Stories about Finland are, Finland's at the top, Finland's the lead, Finland is our aspirational peer, Finland is what to emulate. And we've heard, we've seen some of the speakers, we've seen some of the materials coming from Finland about how they accomplish what they accomplish. This is not that story. So things have changed in Finland. Have you heard about things changing in Finland? So in the past couple of years, Finland is going through a bit of a personality crisis. Who are we? What's happening to us? What do we need to be doing differently? So in Finland, in education, things were about the same from 95 to about 2010. It's a long time. Finland was liberated from Sweden and Russia in the 40s, and then they started thinking about what their identity is, who they are, a lot of culture and pride. So they developed this education system to be excellent. That was their goal. Every student would be literate, every student could have opportunities to go into higher education. They did that really, really well with a balance of local autonomy and national vision. And that worked great until about 5 years ago. So about 5 years ago, the economy changed. A lot of the jobs, wood, timber, and boat building, and Nokia were gone. So Finland had to rethink where students are going after education, and they saw their PISA scores sliding down. So they went from 1 to 12 in the world. Still great, but alarming. And one of the things that was most alarming in Finland, they said that their students were being bored out. Have you heard this? Bored out? They're bored out of school. So bored out for them was either tuning out, like being present physically but not engaged, or not even showing up anymore. So that was the most alarming thing. So the students, their community wasn't prepared for the future, to lead and change the future, if they weren't even in school. So Finland went through this identity crisis of deciding who they are and what they could be. They had not used technology in school. They had a little bit of technology in the 90s. They hadn't really done much since then. And they saw that as one way that they could change. They also changed their curriculum. So they were kind of on the disruptive side of things all of a sudden. So imagine, you're in Finland, you're a teacher, you've been teaching 20 or 30 years, it's going great, your students are achieving, the world loves you, hundreds of thousands of educational tourists come to visit you, it's all good, and all of a sudden the government says, we're going to change everything. Things are not working. How do they do that? There's a lot of fear. So a lot of conversation. They spent a couple of years talking with teachers, with cities, at the national level, with employers, with higher education, trying to figure this out. So they started with curriculum. They decided that to disrupt outcomes for students, they need to completely rethink curriculum. So they have the curriculum that's familiar, subject areas, language, math, science, humanities, the arts. Have you heard about what they did with the curriculum? Anybody hear about the story? Where'd you hear?
I heard that they did away with subject matter completely,
Uh-huh.
and that they went to completely project-based education.
Yes, they did away with subject matter completely. No more subjects. I'm a science teacher. What the heck am I going to do now? I don't have a subject specialty. That's
Team-based collaborative learning. Team-based collaborative learning with co-teachers.
outstanding. Okay, so they changed not only the curriculum, but they changed their approach. Teams, projects, collaboration. And instead of measuring content knowledge, you know what they're measuring?
Project-based assessment.
Skills, they're measuring skills, which they define a lot like the skills that Peter mentioned earlier, those C's, those 21st century skills. They actually have 6 C's that they measure. Through project-based learning, but they don't call it project-based learning, they call it phenomenon-based learning. So it integrates, right? So it's a, think about a phenomenon, like, some of the examples that I heard this morning, like in the Wonderopolis, thank you. So in Wonderopolis, there are questions that don't really tie to a content area, like who invented vegans or why do wolves swim when they walk, but phenomena. So phenomena in the world or phenomena in humanity. They start with that to engage interests and lateral thinking and creativity and connections among content areas. So this is what they're building now. They're building this. They decided they made these decisions. Now they're building this new approach in education and figuring out how technology fits into that. So if you wanted to know kind of now what's going on, Posse Cylinder, there are many posses, I think that must be the equivalent of John or Peter. Posse Cylinder is the director of e-learning in the city of Helsinki, which is the largest education system in Finland. And he's got a website called phenomenaleducation.info that explains some of what they're doing with that phenomenon-based approach, how they integrate skills and the context of multiple content areas. So content and knowledge still matters a lot. There's still knowledge and academic skills that students need within the bigger picture of skills and thinking and collaboration. So that's all still there. It takes a different form. So he's got an ebook about how to create the schools of the future that he's published on his website, phenomenaleducation.info. It explains what this means in a classroom, right? So we can understand from the national level why Finland has changed, why they're disrupting education, get a sense of how that's happening in conversations across levels. What does that actually look like? So one of the things that they've done, this is actually some of the high-level points from the Ministry of Education itself. And I'll show you an example of what they've done to create the curriculum and the projects within the schools. So, from the Board of Education, and the Finnish Board of Education, this is kind of where they're headed, new curriculum. And one of the reasons that I'm telling you this is that about a year ago, when my team started working in Finland, we said, we need to know about Manteca. So we've been carrying the Manteca story to Finland so they can see what's possible in a short period of time. So Finland knows you. Yeah. And so, they were another place that was thinking, yes, we need to disrupt curriculum now, but with technology is new, that's different, that's strange. And what do? We phase, we pilot. Well, here's Manteca. Manteca went all in. Everybody's on board, and exactly what you showed this morning in the first session. From primary, intermediate, middle, and high school now, students all have that experience. They've got the tools. They're building those skills together. And just like is happening here, you can share among each other what's working, what you're doing. So, Finland is paying attention to what Manteca is doing. France is paying attention to what Manteca is doing. School districts around the U.S. are paying attention to what Manteca is doing. So they decided that they want to be a country of learning. They want to put learning at the top of what Finland is known for. Not just schools, but learning. So they want to spread the learning beyond schools. And that's why they brought communities into the conversations. And they're rethinking what a learning environment is. So I'm excited that I get a chance to not only do the magic kingdom today, but see some of the behind the scenes tomorrow and see what the classrooms look like here. And they're rethinking what initial teacher preparation looks like. So in Finland, every teacher starts out with a master's degree, really high level of expectation. But it's not just about the learning and the cognition, they're also mandating physical activity in all the schools. Do you have this? Yay, okay. So you're the vanguard. Finland's behind you. And they think with communities. The school is starting from the age of 7. And the early years are really about play and exploration. So the phenomena are different there that students would study based on when they move on up through their education. So this is what their goals will look like. ICT competence is listed, but none of these are measured separately. So none of these are tested. They do not have national exams. They have a culture of trust in the country. So the government and families trust educators. If educators say students have accomplished these competencies, they trust that that's the case and they move on. And the next teacher trusts that the teacher before built those competencies. But they're all integrated into the phenomenon-based learning approach. So still, they have to kind of make sense of that. Figure out what that would look like in terms of measures. So they're developing a set of national rubrics. So they wanted to make sure that students at different levels would display those 6 C's that they've got. And teachers would be able to see exemplars and indicators of what they look like within the classroom. And they decided to put this whole new curriculum into a OneNote. So they've got this incredible finished OneNote of their C's and their rubrics and everything that they're working on so that they can share it. They want to be shareable. They want to be kind of an open source country when it comes to rethinking education. But as far as the technology and how they infuse and how they grow the capacity to use the technology, that's one of the things that they're looking at the Manteca story to do. So from an organizational standpoint, we've got those different cultures, those different ways that organizations form and change and approach their work. Within those organizations, individuals. So in this district, I think of educators as being people with a definite growth mindset, thinking, where can I go? What can happen? You may be familiar with SAMR, one way of thinking about using technology. So think about a year ago, maybe you were here, you had lots of new technology, you had lots of new tools, you had lots of new opportunities. If you thought about your best approach, your best strategy, your best lesson a year ago versus today, are you in the same place? Have you moved? Do you have, if someone says, can you really modify what's happening in your classroom, or can you redefine what's happening in your classroom? Do you have more examples from others or that you've created that you can share? Do you feel like more of your practice is higher on the SAMR scale? So I hear people talking about SAMR as a ladder. Have you heard this? SAMR is a ladder to climb. So there are times, we heard some examples this morning, of when technology as a substitute is a good thing. That is the goal. That's a good goal. The student was absent, who was working from home. Okay? They had an assignment that they could do. They had some review that they could do, some practice that they could do. They didn't have access to the materials in the classroom. They had some technology that they could use. This substituted. That's great. That gave that student important opportunities. There's no reason to think any further than that in that case or in many other cases. So when people think about SAMR as a ladder that we always need to kind of keep heading to the top, keep moving up, I think that's not the case. I think we decide what matters, be ready to think about the top of the ladder because we've got new opportunities, we've got new tools, we've got new learning environments. We can do things that are different than we could do before. So there are things we do differently and different things that we can do. So things that we can do differently, sometimes there are reasons to do them down here. Doing different things that we couldn't do before, that's when we need to be looking up there. So I think just thinking deliberately and thinking together about what that looks like, what those possibilities are, that's the purpose of SAMR. To kind of help us to keep refining, to keep growing, to keep rethinking. Okay, that's that kind of dynamic and innovative approach. So, I want to share with you a brief story. I'm going to show you just about a minute and a half of a student, actually two students, two sisters. So, I don't know, this was from September, so you may have heard about this. The two sisters who built the space balloon. Did anybody hear about that? Okay, so this is an example of students thinking in a transcendent way. What could they accomplish beyond themselves? What could they do with technology? What could they do creatively, collaboratively? What could they do with communication? So it really embodies those C's. I'll show you just a minute and a half, but you can, if you want to, actually their father created I think a 30-minute story of what they had done. So you can see a longer version of it. It's the Jung, Y-E-U-N-G, Jung sisters who built a space balloon. So we can see an idea of what they did. As an example of sort of transcendent learning and experiences, and then show you a project. So in the garage, they built this launcher. They tried it first with PVC pipe, which was too heavy, so it's a great example of try and fail and stay motivated and keep trying. They attached a GoPro camera to it because they wanted to film what it looked like to go from the Earth into space, and they wanted to see the blackness of space. And they did this with a weather balloon, so a helium weather balloon that they attached, and they launched it. And then they also had a GPS on it, so pretty inexpensive technology they attached to this thing that they built. One is 10 years old, one is 8 years old. And they read, they figured out, they learned that, their parents know how to use a video camera, but aren't scientists. So they really did a lot of this learning on their own. Because they had this question, what does it look like? Could we send something up into space? And so with the camera, it filmed the whole journey, which was less than an hour, really. And with GPS, they had on a mobile phone, they were tracking the device, and they were kind of following it through wilderness, and then found it when it came back down and got the camera and got the video. So then they got excited. They started thinking about what else can they do now that they've succeeded and done this, and they've shown this video. They learned a ton, and they're getting funding. So they're asking organizations to fund their next project. It's kind of like a little Kickstarter. And so it started out simple, and it grew because they were not afraid to take a risk and fail and keep trying, and they had something that was meaningful to them. And it was like the videos, the Stephen Unterholzner, okay? And some of the engineering projects that he was doing, sorry, heard the name for the first time. Now, for other projects, for other ideas, what students can get involved in, there is a group called Deep Challenge. So they focus on what's called deep learning. So Michael Froman's deep learning, the 6 C's of deep learning. And they want to help students accomplish those skills kind of in that flipped way that Finland is approaching, so flipping skills on top, content to support, subject areas to support. So that every month they have a new challenge. So they have a website, a global website. And countries, students, classrooms around the world go into this website, and if there's a challenge that's starting, they can choose to join that challenge. There's a solar challenge, there's a water challenge. So these challenges, one of the cool things about the challenges is that they're tied to the Millennium Goals, the UN Millennium Goals. So, you know, no small potatoes for the challenge or for these kids. So they go into the website, and if they're interested in the challenge of the month, they can join, and they can just try something and submit it. It may be an idea, it may be a thing that they build, a thing that they try. Challenges and responses to challenges can take many forms. But they have to submit at least a video that shows what they did or explains what their approach to that challenge is. Then, if they have a challenge in mind, if they want to submit a challenge, they can submit a challenge to be considered for a month in the future. And then at the end of every month, they see the videos in the project. You can see some of them. Some of them are just drawings, right? So some of them are not building. They could be. They could be coding. It could be anything. Some of them are just ideas, good ideas. So it's a way to bring kids together, think in a transcendent way beyond themselves, to share ideas, to start those collaborations. Who else is working on something that I'm interested in? So it could be a Skype relationship. It could be a mystery Skype that goes out of it. So there are lots of ways to think about how something as simple as, let's think together about a really hard problem and what we can come up with and what we can do together. So maybe there's something like that that's going on in your district to challenge students and help them think big and help them to think broadly. I would love to hear about that and be able to share that. But this may be something that the students are interested in. And students of all ages. So I've seen the very youngest to secondary level students sharing this deep challenge. So I was inspired. So last point. Didn't even think about that. So how can teachers get new ideas? You're getting great ideas here today. You may look at research, what the research says. If you have something that you need to accomplish, you may read the research, get some ideas there. You may be doing your own research. You may be doing inquiry projects and kind of deliberately looking at what's happening, results. One of the projects this morning, one of the teachers this morning, I'm not going to remember her name, she was a science teacher in middle school. Christina Hansen, thank you. She did an inquiry project, in my view. So she looked at what her current approach to vocabulary teaching was in science, measured how the students did, tried out a new approach with OneNote and PowerPoint, then measured how the students did, saw that they did so much better, she threw out the vocabulary test, revised her practice, and then shared it, right? That's the essence of teacher inquiry, teacher research. So maybe she'll do something again and iterate on that, and we'll work even better and she'll share it, and other people will be able to improve on it, right? So you may be involved in an inquiry to some extent, using the new tools that you have. And you may have access to analytics, such as through Office Mix, or through some of the data that you're collecting. I think that's the way to triangulate, to put together what works for you, your students, now in your class. Ideas can come from research, but really the specifics need to come from what's happening locally with your own students. So I encourage you to continue doing that. All right, so transcend, keep going. It's my ending word. Keep doing what you're doing and sharing what you're sharing, because people are listening and paying attention and being inspired by what you're doing. So again, thank you for what you have done and for allowing me to be here today. Right on schedule. Excellent.